who is St. John of the Cross?
Oh yeah, so St. John, he was just this young friar. And not to go into his whole biography, but he grew up so different from Teresa. Like Teresa was like wealthy, she was socialite, you know, all these things. He grew up super poor. His father died when he was a kid. And his father actually was like of the higher class, but he fell in love with his mom, who was the lowest class. She was a servant girl at like an inn. Yeah. But he was so taken by her beauty, by her goodness, her holiness, that he and his relatives disowned him. So if John's father was disowned by all his parents, his uncles and stuff, because he married lower, you know, and really low. And so he lost everything. So it's kind of beautiful because it like, you can see that romantic nature in John too. It's like, give up everything, you know, for the love, for the beloved. Wow. And so his dad was poor. He started being a weaver like his mom, and he died, you know, from whatever disease. And the kids had nothing, you know, and the mom was going around, they call it the hunger pilgrimage, to some of the old, like his relatives, to try to see, can you help us out? But the relatives closed the door. You know, they wouldn't help because she was the lower class. And so John grew up with that kind of poverty, but because of a couple like really instrumental people who took favor on him, he was brought into a school, he was educated, and he was super smart. So they like, you know, kept him going, and he helped out. He worked in a hospital to like make money, and it was a hospital for syphilis, you know, back then. So he was just like, he saw a lot early on, let's say, you know, and imagine 16th century hospital, what that would have looked like, you know, and all that he went through. And so he knew human fragility, and he knew, so again, it's like, he was very human, I guess, like Teresa, but great poverty. But he did so well in school that they actually offered him to be the chaplain of the hospital, which was like a high position. The Jesuits wanted him to, because they were new and he went to a Jesuit school. But he, for different reasons, he decided to become a Carmelite. Even though Carmelites weren't like the most splendid of the church, you know, of the orders, and they were struggling. As I said, there was this tension. There was kind of they had gone down a bit, and but he loved Our Lady, so it was Our Lady's order, and that eremitical ideal. You know, he wanted that like alone with God. You know, God alone is my everything. So he wanted to join the Carmelites. But early on, he felt some dissatisfaction too, and they say he wanted to be a Carthusian. So he was planning on leaving actually to be a Carthusian, and that's right when Saint Teresa met him. So he had this idea, I'm going to go be a Carthusian so I can follow this call of God on my life. And Teresa said, don't do that. You know, stay with us. Like, you can have all that you want, like within Carmel, and just help with this new thing that I'm doing. That she got permission to start these convents of friars too. So he joined ranks with her, and they started this common project of the Reform of Carmel. And he kind of was the head of the you know, the male part, even though it came from her still, but he was like her kind of vicar in a way. Of starting the male branch of the Discalced Carmelites. So
since the general was so pleased with Teresa, presumably John had his blessing as well?
Yeah, well, it's really the men. The men caused all the problems, because Teresa was told you could only found 2 friaries, right? Because the general was afraid that like it could lead to division, the men. He wasn't afraid of the women.
Oh, I see. So with the hairs on the head comment had to do with convents, but only 2 friaries that can follow a strict rule for the men.
Exactly. Okay. Exactly. And so John was totally innocent in this. Like, he started, you know, he started Holy Mother's Project. They started this first little convent called Durello, or monastery. But early on too, it started growing a lot. And so more people wanted to join. And because of the intervention of very powerful people, even like the king, the general allowed a couple more foundations. But then all this political stuff happened, questions about jurisdiction. This cardinal gave power to a friar to like found as many convents as he wanted, basically. Even though, so this cardinal had power from the Pope, but the general didn't believe that and didn't agree with that. So it was this like crazy combination of like discord and not knowing where jurisdiction was. Wow. So they ended up founding all these new convents against the general's wishes, because they thought they could, basically. They thought they could, and they really could. But it didn't go well. And that's where like all the fights started, you know, and poor John was in the middle of this, you know. He was just a holy man. He was like the novice master, the formator. But he was eventually arrested, you know, for being disobedient.
By his order.
By his order.
I don't even know what that means, right? Today, it doesn't make sense to me.
It's so different, with separation of church and state and everything is so different.
Right.
It's like, but back then it was like, if you were a friar, let's say, and you ran away from the convent, like the civil authorities would like bring you back.
That's kind of cool. All right. Yeah. So then he was imprisoned.
Yes.
In basically the size of a cupboard.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that right?
They took him to Toledo, and he was in their monastery, big Carmelite monastery there. And they put him in, it was basically like superiors or other, like, let's say a bishop visited, they would have like a guest suite. And one of the rooms was kind of like a bathroom, whatever bathrooms looked like back then. And he was put in that. Okay. So this like little cell that was meant really just to be a bathroom.
Okay.
And he was there for 9 months because he wouldn't give in.
What?
Yeah.
9 months in a bathroom. So, there was an actual toilet in this bathroom so he could live there and they would give him his food. Is that how it worked?
Yeah. With the toilet thing, they must have had just like a bucket or something, but they didn't let him change his habit one time or clothes. He didn't get washed one time.
What?
They would give him some bread, and some sardines maybe, but like, it was terrible conditions, terrible. And like, they wanted him to give in. All they wanted him to do was say like, okay, I'll go back because they saw that they thought he was being disobedient.
To the general. And he was saying, no, like we have permission to do this and I'm not going to go against St. Teresa, So 9 months is a lot of time. Did someone not try to get the general and the Pope in a room or on a text thread or something?
That's right. Well, it's funny you say that because St. Teresa, she went out of her way. She wrote the king. She wrote so many letters. Like, no one cares about John. She was saying that, like, why isn't anyone doing anything? Like, he was totally forgotten,
Wow.
But that's how it goes. And in a way, he used that time. Like when we talk about the dark night, like he experienced whatever it took him to get to that point of like total surrender and union with God. Like it was through those 9 months.
It really makes Thomas's house arrest in a castle look pretty easy, cushy, doesn't it? Like that's unreal. Yeah. And did he have any writing instruments or because I know he wrote some of his poetry during that time. Maybe he just memorized it or?
Definitely, exactly. He memorized it. So, towards the end, there was a more sympathetic guard and he gave him some like pen and paper. And so he would write stuff down, but it's really neat because everyone thinks like, well, The Dark Night, that poem would have been written in the prison. But he didn't write that in the prison. He wrote that after. What he wrote in the prison there was a couple of them, but one of the main ones was the Spiritual Canticle.
Okay.
Which, if you ever read it, it's like the most beautiful like love poem, and it's basically the Song of Songs in a way.
I love it.
Right?
Yeah.
And all this images too of like open fields, water, like animals, like young love, and all these things. And so he's writing that in this like nasty little bathroom where he's sick and stinky and just struggling, But that's how God was working in him. He was able to like just go to the beauty of God, regardless. And so that poem, I think, carries even more weight in a sense because it came through just like abject suffering.
Wow. So, how would you, because it is kind of sometimes confusing for people why the church does have all these different orders. And in one sense, they all seem very similar, but obviously there's distinctions that are distinct enough to necessitate that they remain divided. So, like when I think of the Dominicans, I would think, of the intellect, I guess. When I think of the Franciscans, I think of the poverty. When I think of Carmelites, I think of union with God. Now, okay. So, but what's tough? Maybe it's just the emphasis, because it's not like the Dominicans aren't down with union with God, and it's not that the Carmelites aren't down with the intellect or poverty. How would you talk about these distinctions?
Yeah, you said it so well, actually, because it's like emphasis, and it's putting you. We could say like the charism. Like every order kind of has a specific charism from their founder that helps them live the gospel in a unique way and representing the life of Christ in a unique way. And so I think union of God would be that focus, intimacy, union, the experience of God. Like we all, like everyone wants that, but like we kind of put all of our bread and butter on that. Like and we could say there's an immediacy to it too. Like where people say, yeah, I want to be united with God and hopefully in heaven. It's like, I think the Carmelite sort of instinct is to say like right now, like I don't want to waste any time. I don't want to and John is like, go up the mountain. Like there's all these other ways you can get up there, like wanding and
Nada.
Yep.
Wow.
Just go right for it right now. Like why wait? And I think that's part of the Carmelite. Like there's almost an impatience for union. I think.
That's beautiful. Yeah. So then did the convents, so once John how did John get let out?
Yeah. It's funny because he eventually escaped, you know?
Okay.
He realized he had gotten dysentery, and imagine how bad that is. Like, and he knew he was going to die. He knew. He was so skinny, he was small. He was a small guy too. He was like, I think he was like 5'2" or 5'1" or something. So he was a little guy, and, not eating much with dysentery. He was like, I'm going to die. And he actually had asked the prior if he could say mass for the Assumption, because he wasn't allowed to say mass either or read anything. All he had was a little breviary. And the prior said, yeah, when you finally stop being disobedient, we'll let you say mass. And John was like, all right, I'm going to die. so and part of the tradition is that Our Lady appeared to him and like showed him how to get out of the jail.
Okay.
Now some witnesses say that.
No, I'm all about it. Let's go with that interpretation. I like that more.
And it makes it easy. You don't wait to be like, that's great, man. Just, but either way, he like figured out how to. And I think of like Shawshank Redemption. He like waited till the guard was asleep, and I think there was like a storm going out. So maybe I'm just getting the movie confused, but he like he like banged the door, in the moment. So he was able to bang open the door without waking the guard, and then there's this whole thing. He was like took sheets, and was able to get down this window, but he didn't calculate it right. So he is hanging out the window, and he was really like 20 feet from the ground still. Oh. And he's this little guy, dysentery, he's about to die, and he's like, shoot. And then he just lands. It just like, I don't even know if he lets go, but all of a sudden he says he just found himself on the ground. He was fine. But then he realized, and this is part of the Carmelite too, we can be kind of spacey, and maybe, this comes somewhat from St. John of the Cross in the sense that he didn't realize either that where he was going into was actually a convent next door of nuns, Conceptionist nuns. So he landed right in their courtyard in the middle of the night. So it's like a cloister, he just went to another cloister. And so if any nun sees this, they're going to scream, And so what happens, he sees that this little dog, little stray dog runs up to a point in the gate. And so he goes up to that point and he sees there's a way out. So he like climbs up, so it's just providence, that like, because he was actually about ready to scream himself, because he's like, there's nothing else I can do. So I have to just like go back to jail. But he sees the little dog, he gets out of the convent, he's on the street, and then he makes his way to, there's a disc house Carmelite nuns in Toledo that had recently been founded. So he stops by there, and they don't believe him, so he knocks on the door. And
he must look like death.
Exactly. With this nasty habit. And so sick. And the sister's like, what is going on? And he's like, listen, I'm Fray John of the Cross. I'm friends with Mother Teresa. And please, can I stay with you? And they let him in, And not long after that, they realized in the Ocarm convent that he had escaped. And so they went immediately to the nuns. And the story is, the sister at the turn, they were like, is there a friar? Is John of the Cross in there? And the sister's behind, there's like a turn, so they can't see the sister, you just hear her. And apparently, to avoid lying, she looked into her sleeve and she was like, there's no friar in here. and then they were like, okay, so then they left. So that's the tradition. I don't know how rooted that is in history, but that's what I've heard in Spain. That's how she avoided it. And so then John was escaped. He was in that convent. They didn't know where he was. He was kind of nursed back to health, and then he made it back to Castile, to Avila, and by that point things had calmed down anyways, and so he was all right. So
wow. Hey, thank you so much for watching. Before you go, do us a favor, leave a comment, let us know what you thought of the video, like, and subscribe.